The more that we can identify with that reality, the happier we will be in this world, and the more we can live in a sense of oneness, not only with all people, but with all of creation. That's the state of consciousness that we need to strive for. Not because we will be exalted and we'll win prizes and we'll get a lot of money for it, but because we will be free from fear, from pain, free from death itself. When we identify with that reality of who we really are, we will be happy. We will be in bliss. As opposed to, what does it say here? Whoever calls his brother an outcast of God shall be in danger of hellfire. That's the alternative. So, why would we even want to call our brother an outcast of God? Because we separate everything out. Maya, that Indian word, means the measurer, means the one who separates this is me and that's you, and we're different because of this and this and this, instead of thinking we are part of that oneness of God. So, Swami, on this topic, goes on to say that we have to really get rid of likes and dislikes. And it's one of those aspects of the spiritual path that's like a razor's edge, because we have to be discriminating. We need to choose our influences very carefully and choose good company that uplifts our consciousness. We need to choose the people in our lives, the things that we do. All of it makes a difference if we want to grow spiritually. And at the same time, we need to get rid of likes and dislikes. And they aren't mutually exclusive. On the spiritual path, the key to likes and dislikes is very simple. When we see someone or something happening that we don't like, someone, and we think, oh, that person is always so fill in the blank, angry, self-centered, whatever it is. The trick of it is to not just dismiss that person then and say, okay, well, I've judged you and I don't want to be with you anymore because you're egoic or whatever it is. Instead, we go, oh, look, I think that person is egoic. Let's look inside. Any ego in there? And right away, the voice inside will go, no ego in there. But then as we relax and look more deeply, we'll go, oh, well, what about that? And what about that? And what about this? And we learn about ourselves. And we go, oh, that is ego, isn't it? Let's get rid of that. Let's let that go. Or this person is angry and I feel angry. So I condemn in him what I feel in myself. And it takes honesty. It takes reflection. It takes introspection. But that's how we learn. And so having likes and dislikes is a blessing, because it reflects back to us what we need to correct. It's very, very helpful. And the more we eradicate those likes and dislikes and remain even in all of our dealings, as the Bhagavad Gita so beautifully says, in several different places, several different ways. Gold, a clod of clay, a Brahman, a cow. It's all the same. The friend, the foe, we love them and we give to them exactly the same. From our hearts as part of God's love, if we live in that consciousness, then we're free. And I love also in this beautiful reading that Swami includes that story about Master and the plant. We think only human beings have souls, only human beings are conscious. If you have ever had a pet or worked with horses or with any kind of animal, you realize what personality distinctions they have and how individual they are and how much they have feelings and they react and relate. One time, just to give you an example of this, a friend and I went to the river near Ananda village, and it was a beautiful summer day, and we went out into the river, and there were a couple of rocks protruding out from the water, and we were sitting, one of us on each of these rocks, and the water was flowing in between us, and we were just chatting. And I looked upstream, and there was a big black snake swimming towards us. And part of my mind recognized that he was playing. I saw an otter here in this river a year or so ago, and he was the quintessential poster child for someone being in their element. He was frolicking. He wasn't swimming. He was rolling and just playing and just so happy. He didn't worry about having his eyes open underwater or getting water in his ears. You know, he wasn't worried about any of that. He was just having a ball. And that's how this little snake was too. He was so light. He was just on the surface of the water and just frolicking. But he was still a snake, and he was coming towards us. So I jumped up, and I yelled, "Snake!" And my friend jumped up and was yelling, too. The little snake spoke English. And he knew exactly what we were saying. We were this huge beings, you know, making all these gestures. And I swear, he backpedaled. Even though snakes don't have legs, he managed to go backwards in the water and get as far away from us as he could, and then he shot off and escaped us into the grass. They're conscious, they feel, they know. In that same river, it happened that I don't know, they let water out of the dam or something, so the water was really high, and then it abnormally dropped, so the water level dropped significantly in a short amount of time, and some fish were caught in little pockets of water in the rocks. And a friend and I were sort of walking up the stream, and we noticed these pockets, and I found a fish caught in just a little pocket of water. And he was desperate. He was scared, and he was thrashing. I could feel that. Who could not feel his desperation? And I was a little afraid because he was thrashing so much to pick him up with my bare hands. It took me a minute to work up the courage, but I did. And I got him back into the water, into the flow, into the stream. He was grateful. I know he was. It's just a little fish. Another time when I lived at Ananda, I had the door open of my cabin. I didn't have a screen door. It was summer. And a little hummingbird came in. And he couldn't find his way out. He was crashing against the window. You know, millions of birds die every year. Almost 1 billion sometimes die every year from just crashing into windows. We need to do something about that. There are solutions, and you know, we need to take care of the animals, the birds, the plants in this beautiful earth that we have. Anyway, so I came up very slowly, and I held him in my hands. Little frightened being. And I released him into the sky. Of course, we have to expand our hearts to include all of creation. Expand our sympathies. Expand our awareness. And as the beautiful Beatitudes of Jesus say, blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. We all need compassion, and the way to receive that compassion is to give it freely and to all beings.
This topic reminded me that the title in particular, Deeds versus Intentions, reminded me of a moment in a television program that I watched once as a child, and the program wasn't even memorable enough that I can recall the name of the program, so that maybe tells you something. But the line was quite memorable. This sort of crusty character was saying to someone else that he felt needed to hear this particular message. You take coulda, woulda, and shoulda in one hand and a quarter in the other hand, and you can buy yourself a donut. And which at the time donuts cost about 25 cents, which sort of tells you something about the value of coulda, shoulda, and woulda. So I sort of remembered that because it tells us something about the I wouldn't say the relative importance of intentions versus deed. You know, we also remember that hell is reportedly paved with good intent. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The floors of hell, I'm told, are paved with the bald pates of clergymen, which gives me pause because we don't want to go there. But going back to the road to hell, we all have good intentions. And, if the road to hell is paved with them, that's a concern. But it's interesting to reflect because good intentions there's nothing wrong with good intentions. We have to have good intentions. It's just that having them is not enough. Because if they sit there with nothing else, it's sort of like a child that both parents just walk away from it. It's orphaned and it doesn't get the nurturing, it doesn't get the attention, it doesn't get the development that it could. I'll give an example of this that was very valuable to me in particular as I watched this over the years. I was walking, Swamiji and I were going to a shopping mall in India near where we lived, and this was a place that we went fairly frequently. There was a bookstore that Swamiji really enjoyed. There was a coffee shop that we all really enjoyed, and we would visit the bookstore and we would visit the coffee shop, and it was all good. So it was just the two of us this one time. This was fairly early in the history of shopping malls in India. So this particular one, the Metropolitan Mall in Gurgaon, was pretty fancy and pretty nice, and it was one of the few that was there. we were walking in, and a lot of the shops were still sort of boarded up. They were not occupied by a business that was open at that time. And I just happened to, as looking around at all this, I just happened to sort of casually mention to Swamiji, if we had one of these, I wonder what we could put in it. And we were walking, and I realized that I was walking by myself. And I turned around, and Swamiji was a few steps behind, and he had stopped. And he just was like, well, what could we put in it? Well, we could put books. We could put music. We could put other products. By the time that bookshop and coffee expedition was over, he had already outlined 10 products, virtually none of which we had at that particular time, but he had created a bookstore and a gift shop out of, you can say, out of thin air, and outlined it on a piece of paper. And we went home and had a fire under us, and it was interesting to watch. And it turned into the Wishing Tree, the Kalpataru bookstore, which went for probably at least a decade longer than it should have been able to survive in that location. It just closed recently as the rents got, higher and higher and higher in that area. But it was fascinating to see. And so we spent months and months creating this. We rented a space, did all this building inside, created cabinets and a design for the window that was really quite beautiful and lovely. And I watched this process as the group was working on it. And there was the designers who created that beautiful design and who helped with the design of all the fixtures inside. They were perfectionists. Now, Swamiji was a perfectionist also, in his way, which is a little different, as you'll see. Well, 2 or 3 times we postponed the opening date of this shop in order to accommodate the perfectionism of these designers. And Swamiji went along with it a little grudgingly, but I mean, okay. 2 times. Well, then they wanted to delay a 3rd time because they were saying, look, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. We got to launch this thing right. It's especially critical in India, they were saying. They were somehow experts in India, even though they were Americans. And anyway, whatever. So the 3rd time, Swamiji just said, no, we are opening the store. In other words, I have adjusted to your reality twice. You're going to adjust to mine now. We've done this your way. Now we're going to just open it and go for it. Well, we did, and it was a beautiful opening. And more importantly, the shop stayed open for 13 years, which was impossible. It was factually and financially impossible that it do so. But there were a small group of people who were absolutely dedicated to it. The deeds did not outweigh the intention, because without the intention, the thing would never have, it wasn't going to fall out of the sky and just manifest in some little shop. I mean, it took that consistent, persistent effort to make it manifest, but without the idea at all, there would be no deeds. So they have to work in concert with each other. And that heartfelt dedication and devotion to that process is the part that we can offer. We have a good idea, an important idea. We don't want to orphan that idea. We want to give it attention, nurturing, love. We have a bad idea. We want to just sort of turn our energy in a different direction and give energy to whatever the good direction is, because it withdraws energy. If we focus on the bad idea, it just sort of energizes it. And we've all done that as well. I spent the day yesterday going to San Francisco to pick up Uma, who just flew in from Italy, and it's wonderful to see her. It's the first time we've seen her in probably 3 or 4 years. She had a terrible injury a few years ago, and her shoulder ended up frozen after, it was injured for a while. So she had to go through all this pain and suffering. Physical therapists out there among us know that a frozen shoulder, I'm not an expert in these things, but it doesn't sound like fun. And it doesn't sound like lubricating oil gets it fixed particularly. It's like it takes a lot of pain and a lot of effort and a lot of work. Well, people would occasionally ask her, perhaps not very delicately, but so why did it happen? Which isn't necessarily a useful question. It can be a useful question. But in her case, she didn't take offense. She was curious and she kind of analyzed it in her way, astrologically, karmically, this way, that way, the other way. She said, I finally came to the conclusion that this was an exercise in, and she quoted something that Sister Gyanamata said, an exercise in the things that happen to us are not important. What we become through them is important. Well, that's fascinating because, while she was going through that, she was in excruciating pain. In fact, she said she would go to her physical therapist, and the doctor and the physical therapist and all these different people, they would say, well, the pain is not important. The pain is not important. She would say, what do you mean it's not important? It is important. It hurts. Okay? It's painful. So one time the physical therapist was working on her and he was, moving her shoulder in some kind of way, which of course takes him being in a certain kind of position, using a certain kind of leverage to do that. Well, he ended up kind of tweaking his own back in the process. And he went, oh, ow. And she said, does it hurt? Is it painful? He said, yes. She said, non importa. It's not important. And he laughed. He burst out laughing. I was like, okay, I get it. It's not important. Yes. But we also have to develop that ability in ourselves to look at the life that we lead and once in a while say to ourselves, non importa. It's not that important. That beautiful affirmation that we did, I am neither the ripples at the surface of the sea, nor yet the crashing waves. All too often in our lives, we live at the surface, which is to say right out here on the edge of wherever we define ourself, be it the body, be it the aura, be it whatever. Well, there's all kinds of commotion going on right out at the edge, just like on the ocean. Okay, maybe sometimes it's just little tiny ripples, but other times it's like kaboom, it's these big, gigantic waves crashing around. Go down 100 feet, 500 feet, 10,000 feet. Do you think anything down there cares that there's a big hurricane blasting around on the surface? Doesn't even, I read one time that a submarine that's 200 or 300 feet down in the ocean basically doesn't even feel anything that's up there on the surface, and certainly not at 500 feet or deeper. There's just no impact. Well, in our lives, meditation gives us the chance to go deep enough to where we don't have to be sloshed around by the circumstances of our lives. We can be aware, we can be in tune, we can be adjusting to that reality as it's appropriate. But we don't have to be tossed by it or torn by it. It's a very important distinction. This deeds versus intentions topic reminded me of an experience that I had recently, well, fairly recently. Our dishwasher went on the blink. And, I tried every trick I could think of. I looked it up on the internet. I got my screwdriver out. I took this apart and that apart and the other thing apart, and I wasn't able to figure it out. So finally I called a repair guy, and he came out, and wouldn't you know it, he gets there. I say, okay, here's the problem. When I push the button to start, the water doesn't come in. It doesn't start the process. Once it starts, every time it was kind of intermittent. Every time it starts, it's fine, it's great. So I push the button, the water comes in. It's like, So for him, it worked. I said, you probably have this happen other times, where somebody calls you and whatever it is, it doesn't happen. So he said, look, here's the thing. I think it's an intermittent electronic issue, but I'm only going to charge you half the service call. If it goes wrong in the next little while, call me back again. I'll only charge you the other half of the service call. So, basically you're going to get 2 for 1 if it comes back. Well, sure enough, a little while later, it went on the blink, and love nor mantras nor whatever could fix it. So I called the guy back. He came. And this time it really didn't work when he came. So he analyzed it and he said, okay, I thought it was this part, and it is. I'm 99 point whatever % sure that it's this part. However, here's the thing. If you pay me to get the part and put the part in, it's going to cost more than the dishwasher is worth. You just might as well go get a new dishwasher. You, he had figured this out, are fairly handy. Plus, you have access to the internet, and you can beat my price. So go on the internet, find the part. He gave me the part number. Get it, put it in. If it's still a problem, then call me back and I'll do whatever. And that's what I did. And then he was about to walk away, and I said, wait a minute. I didn't pay you the other half of your original service charge, which was all he ever was going to get. Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. And so I did. And forever after, that guy's phone number is pasted on our refrigerator because it was like, well, geez, this guy gave us a heck of a good deal. I mean, it was just amazing. But what it made me realize is that he could easily have been justified in saying, well, you called me out here, the problem didn't happen, so I get my service charge. That's the rules, those are the rules, I'm enforcing the rules, deal with it, big guy. So, and I would have done it, but instead it was like, well, let's work with this thing, let's see what can happen. If in our lives we can approach life with that way, it's not going to always work out the way we hope or expect, but the joy in the process will be there. And I just appreciated that this guy was savvy enough to sort of figure out, hey, there are alternatives. It doesn't have to just be black or white. Like in the reading, the brother doesn't have to just be an idiot or a fool or an outcast of God. It can be like, well, okay, maybe he's a little misguided right now, but he's still my brother. We can still find some middle ground here. We can still find the point of connection. That's the part of this that's so important. And as Nirmala was pointing out, we are connected with all life. Let us connect with that not only in deep meditation, but also in everything else that we do in our lives, because that connection can grow